Okay, welcome back, and time to mount the engine. So putting the engine on the engine mount before you mount the engine, I think, is the best way to do it. So I've used the 1-inch long 4-40 bolts with a nylon nut and a lock washer or flat washer for those, and also made sure that it is tight against the seat, the flat part underneath the engine here, so it's tight there. Also made sure that it's the two halves of the engine mount are together. Okay, and at this point, these nylon nuts are only finger tight. I'll tighten them later after we get the engine on. So, two things have to occur. One, we're going to have to put some Loctite on the bolts, okay? But I've decided I will go ahead and use the push rod that has a Z-bend on it. So that Z-bend has to go into the arm of the carburetor to do that. But I also discovered in testing, because I always test before I do anything, that this push rod is too long. So I've measured, and if we cut it off at about 15 inches, then it'll be more than enough. We'll have to cut it off again, but that's all right. It'll at least fit all the way in there. So I guess I don't have my cutters, do I? Well, I must have my cutters. There they are. Okay, so I'm going to cut this. I measured and cutting it off at 15 inches. Okay. And so that's good. Yep. All right. So now, to do the Loctite, the easiest way to do this is drop the Loctite in the holes where the blind nuts are. I'm going to tilt the airplane up like this, take the Loctite, and just drop a goodly amount in there. Okay. And put this back on. Okay, so now, this isn't the easiest thing to do, but it's doable. So now you feed the fuel tubing through the engine mount and up and out of the way. Okay, and I'm going to put them all to one side. I'm going to tilt the engine this way, sort of get it lined up, and drop engine bolt into a hole here. Get it lined up. Okay, there we go. I'm going to take a long flat bladed screwdriver and reach down in there and just start that a little. Just to make sure it gets started. Okay, that one's started. Do it on the other side. Move this over. Line it up. There it goes. Reach in on this side and just get it started. Okay, so the two top ones are started. And the bottom ones are going to be easier. Make sure they line up okay. Drop that in. started. And make sure you got the lock washer and flat washer on the bolt before you put it in. And I just dropped it. I do that at least once on every project. Okay, so not to worry, it's okay. There we go. And now make sure this one's started. Okay, now I'm going to finger tight them. Okay, 2-finger tight. And we'll do this one. In this case, the flat blade is probably easier than the Phillips, because it's easier to lean around the high-speed needle here. And when you get over to this side, it's going to be easier to lean around this side of the engine. Okay, so I actually put 2 drops of Loctite in each hole, and I can see nice blotches of blue Loctite inside here, which is just fine. So now let's see here. Yep, everything looks good and snug. I'll go ahead and lock these down as tight as I can get them. Of course, you want to do that before Loctite dries, but it takes a while for Loctite to dry, so you got plenty of time. Okay. All right. Turn it over to do the 2 bottom ones. Now I also realize that according to the manual you were supposed to put the tail wheel here first, but I didn't want the tail wheel stuff in the way. I figure I can get not tail wheel, the nose wheel. I figure I can get the nose wheel in after this engine is on. And if I can't, I'll figure out a way to do it. Okay, so that's good and tight on the engine mount on the firewall. Now I'm going to take the 1/4 inch nut driver and turn the airplane over and tighten these nuts that are and I guess I'll have to hold it in place. I'm going to use the 3/32 Dubro ball end to hold it. Let me set this down. Okay, and I'll use the ball end for this one here to make sure that holds, and then tighten this. Okay, and do the same for the other one. Use the ball end. Try not to scrape where the muffler is mounted, and I'm going to tighten with the 1/4 inch driver, and both actually. Okay. And then the last one is right here. Okay. So, let's see here. Yep, those look good and tight. The bolts, I'm looking at the split lock washer, and they're nice and flattened out. And I can see blue Loctite that ran through. So that looks good. And let's see, I think the engine's mounted. What do you think? I like it. And you know, I forgot. After all that, I forgot to put this on. So they say with every mistake there's at least one silver lining. The silver lining, the mistake obviously was I forgot to put the push rod into the arm of the carburetor before I mounted the engine. But the silver lining is it would have been easy anyways, because the push rod needs to have a bend in it to make it work better. So let me show you what I mean. So here's the push rod right there. You see it's pointing up because of the angle that the tube is. And I don't like to have that much bend in it, a curve in it. So I need to have a sort of like a 20 to 30 degree bend, starting back here and then coming down to there. So what I'm going to do is, the carburetor is all the way open, meaning this arm is all the way back. And by the way, I just noticed the carburetor on the Thunder Tigers are opposite the ones on the OS engines. So where we had to reverse that throttle channel, we don't need to reverse that throttle channel. So we'll fix that later. So I'm going to line up the Z-bend to be in line with the hole that's going in. It's going to go in the outermost hole. I'm going to take my Sharpie marker here and mark a spot right here where I want to start that bend. Okay. So I'm going to pull this out. Now in doing bends, especially when there's a Z-bend already there, you have to be careful to make sure that that Z-bend stays properly oriented to the bend you're about to make. So I've got two needle nose pliers, these and these. These are square needle nose pliers, and these are pointy needle nose pliers. But the deal here is, okay, so which way do you bend it in relation to the way that Z-bend goes? First off, the bend needs to be straight. Okay, so if I've got the Z-bend in that orientation, then that needs to bend down as I hold this one straight. Okay, so I'm going to hold this straight, make sure the Z-bend is good, and bend that down about 30 degrees. Just like that. Okay, now we'll test that. I'll put it back in here. Okay, let's see how it fits. Okay, bend it just a little too much. Let me bend it back. instead of being 30 degrees, it's probably like 20 degrees. So let me bend that back a little. Okay, test that. And I'm looking for the bend where that Z-bend will naturally touch. And I think that's going to do it. Yep. Okay, so that bend is about that angle, okay? And that bend naturally comes down to, I don't like any pressure on the push rod inside the tube. So I want that bend to come right down to the end, and now it does. And so let me stop the camera. All I'm going to do now, I'm going to leave the screws in the firewall fine. I can take the 4 bolts off the bottom of the engine, and I should be able to put that engine right back on because everything else is fixed down. And so let me stop the camera and I'll get that done. Be right back. Okay, so with the engine out, I didn't disturb the bolts that have thread lock on them. And now that I have my bend the way I want it, I'm going to put the Z-bend in the bottom hole of the engine and turn it like that. And then we're going to stick that in the tube, and holding up the fuel tubing out of the way, we're going to put that engine mount right back where it was. Right where the holes go. Line up the holes. There we go. Okay. Good. All right. So let me screw those back on off camera, and I'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. And engine is now in place, and the arm. Let me see. Yeah, there he goes. All right, you can see the arm is moving nice and smoothly, with a little bend in it, and that's how you do it. The bend is underneath the carburetor, so it won't be affected by the carburetor. I mean, not carburetor, the muffler. So it's underneath the muffler. Bend won't affect that, but it comes out and then down, and should work very well. Okay, so engine is now installed. Thank you very much. Stay tuned for the next video.